The island was quiet when John White stepped ashore. No smoke, no voices, no signs of life, just empty houses, overgrown paths, and a single word carved carefully into a wooden post. 3 years earlier, more than 100 men, women and children had been left here to build England's first permanent colony in the New World. Now they were gone. Not dead, not rescued, simply gone. And that unanswered absence still echoes across history. This story begins in the late 16th century, when England was locked in rivalry with Spain and desperate to secure a foothold in North America. Queen Elizabeth I supported overseas ventures not only for wealth, but for power and prestige. Across the Atlantic, the coastline of what is now North Carolina promised land, resources, and a strategic base. Roanoke Island, narrow and exposed, became the unlikely stage for a bold experiment that would test the limits of ambition and survival. Before any disappearance, there was already trouble. England's early attempts at settlement had been fragile, underfunded and poorly supplied. The first Roanoke colony, made up of soldiers, failed within a year. Relations with local Native American groups were tense. Food was scarce and leadership was divided. When a second group was planned in 1587, it was meant to correct those mistakes. This time families would settle. This time the colony would endure. But even before they arrived, pressure mounted. Supplies were limited, communication with England was uncertain, and the Atlantic itself was an unpredictable barrier. The second colony landed in July 1587 under the leadership of John White, an artist and mapmaker rather than a hardened military commander. Among the settlers was his pregnant daughter Eleanor, who soon gave birth to Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. It was a hopeful moment, but hope alone could not fill empty stomachs. The settlers struggled almost immediately. Crops failed, relations with neighboring tribes were uneasy, and with winter approaching, the colonists begged White to return to England for supplies. White agreed, believing he would be gone only a few months. But history intervened. England was preparing for war with Spain, and the looming threat of the Spanish Armada delayed his return. Ships were seized. Sailors were conscripted. What should have been a short journey stretched into 3 long years. When White finally returned in August 1590, Roanoke was deserted. The settlement had been deliberately dismantled. Buildings were taken down, not destroyed. There were no signs of battle, no graves, no scattered belongings. Only 2 clues remained: the word Croatoan carved into a post, and the letters CRO etched into a tree. This was not a cry for help. Before leaving, the settlers had agreed on a plan. If they were forced to move, they would carve their destination. If they left under danger, they would add a cross. There was no cross. Croatoan was the name of a nearby island and the people who lived there, now known as Hatteras Island. The message suggested intention, not panic. Yet White never followed the clue. A violent storm and a damaged ship forced him to abandon the search and return to England. He would never see the New World again, and the fate of the colonists would remain unresolved. The consequences of that disappearance were profound. England's dream of colonization faltered, shaken by uncertainty and fear. For years, Roanoke was a cautionary tale, proof that the New World was dangerous, unpredictable, and unforgiving. When England finally succeeded with Jamestown in 1607, lessons learned from Roanoke shaped its planning, governance, and reliance on supply lines. Failure had carved its own instructions into history. One lesser-known detail reframes the mystery. Archaeological and environmental evidence suggests the colonists may not have vanished at all, at least not suddenly. Tree ring data indicates a severe drought struck the region between 1587 and 1589, one of the worst in centuries. Food shortages would have been devastating. In that context, moving to Croatoan, where relations were friendlier and resources more reliable, becomes a practical decision rather than a desperate one. Some historians believe the settlers gradually integrated with local Native American communities, blending into the landscape instead of perishing in it. That possibility matters today because Roanoke forces us to rethink what disappearance means. History often remembers conquest and survival in stark terms, victory or defeat, life or death. Roanoke suggests something quieter: adaptation, movement, and cultural merging that left few written traces. It reminds us how fragile records can be. and how entire lives can slip through the cracks of official history. More than 4 centuries later, the Lost Colony still shapes how America tells its origin story. It stands as the first chapter of English America not because it succeeded, but because it failed, and because no one ever fully explained why. Every excavation, every document, every new theory is an attempt to answer a silence that has never spoken back. John White returned to an empty shore and a word carved into wood. He never learned what happened to his daughter, his granddaughter, or the people he led across an ocean, and perhaps that is why Roanoke still unsettles us. Not because it ended in tragedy, but because it ended without an ending. If the colonists didn't vanish, but chose to leave and become something else, does that change how we think about the first English settlers in America? And if this story moved you, consider liking and sharing, because some histories only survive if we keep telling them.